In general, today's Farbrengen was a shorter Farbrengen. It was Siches were shorter Siches. It was at around 3 o'clock when the Rebbe already distributed the mashke. We will go over briefly the Farbrengen of this afternoon. The Rebbe began that today we benched Odor Sheni, and we are entering the month of Mishanichnas Odor Marbim Besimcha. Upon entering Odor, we have to increase in Simcha, and especially when the preparation for going into this month was also a month of Odor, which is a special month. So it's not like in an ordinary year. So being that the preparations for going into the month of Marbim Besimcha were in a special month, in the month of also in the month of Adar, the month of Adar Rishon, so definitely this will call for an increase for a Hisafa in the Simcha, and shall be a special Simcha in the month which we are entering in. Especially this year that it is a leap year, Shana Mu'beres, a Shana Tmima, a whole and complete year, as the Rebbe stresses at many occasions during the year. And especially that during this month we have the Yontif of Purim. And Purim, we know the Simcha is an unlimited Simcha. The Simcha in Purim is Ada Lo Yada, which in no way does this compare to the Simcha of all of the Yomim Tovim. All the Yomim Tovim, even though they are called Moyadim L'Simcha, which means they are Yomim Tovim, which we are to rejoice on Yontif. Nonetheless, the Gemara tells us that during Yontif, Bezdin would send around shluchim, emissaries, to make sure that people don't go overboard in the Simcha. However, the Simcha of Purim was such a Simcha, it was a Simcha of Ada Lo Yada. And Purim Bechlal has a shaychus to Shabbos. Because regarding Purim we find Kimu v'kiblu ha'yehudim asher echelu lasis is a pasuk in the Megillah, that the Yidden, after the Nes of Purim, they reinforced their commitment to Torah. What they began, asher echelu lasis, what they once began, meaning by Matan Torah, now by the Nes Purim, they reinforced the commitment which they once began. And the Inyan of Matan Torah definitely has a shaychus to Shabbos, because the Gemara tells us, L'kul ha'alma, according to everybody's under the opinion that Torah nitna b'Shabbos. So Mamela, today, that now that we are in a Shabbos, this Shabbos, and we are benching the month, that in this month we have Purim, and Purim has a shaychus to Shabbos. So Mamela, it's definite that there is a call for an increase in Simcha on this Shabbos. And especially regarding Matan Torah, we find, on one side we see that Gemara uses the expression Mala Halon be'ema be'yira be'resas u'be'ziyah, which means that when the Yidden were receiving the Torah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it was with ema ve'yira, with fear and tremblance, and with sweat and shivering from fear. But at the same time, the Alter Rebbe explains that there was a tremendous simcha when the Yidden received the Torah. So Mamela, when we're talking about simcha, it's takaninian. It's such a simcha that's permeated with yira shamayim, with fearing of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but at the same time, we're talking about a tremendous inyan of simcha. And especially also taking in consideration that we are in Shabbos. And Shabbos, there's a sifri, on the pasuk of Yom Simchaschem, on your days of simcha, the Torah uses the expression. And the sifri says, what do these days refer to? Eilu HaShabbosos. That Shabbos is called the day of simcha. So Mamela, now that we are on this Shabbos, we are on the Shabbos when we are benching the month of Adar Sheni. So the month of Adar, definitely we increase in Simcha. And the Rebbe says, we're talking about Hamaisa Hua Ika, have to bring down everything into actuality, bring down everything into deed, into Maisa. What does this require from us? That not only when we are entering the month, even before we enter the month, now on this Shabbos, which Shabbos gives bracha to the entire week, and in this case not only to the entire week but to the entire month. This is the day that we bench the oncoming month of Adar Sheni. So Mamela, the inyan of Simcha should start right now, and as the Rebbe expressed himself, it should be a shturmish Simcha, a very strong way, in a very forceful way, the inyan of Simcha, and taka to begin right away. And beginning right away means that everybody should taka say l'chaim v'levracha, and everybody should participate in the inyan of Simcha, and the Purim Dike Simcha, which should begin right away, beginning from today. Then the Rebbe continued Chazal tell us, Be'echod ba'adar mashmi'in al ashkolim. The first day in Adar, that is when, in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, they would start a campaign where every Yid would give the Machzis HaShekel. That is why today is called Shabbos Shkolim. We took out an additional Sefer Torah today, and we read in the Torah portion, which is from last week's Seder, from Parshas Kisisa, where the Torah tells us about the importance of contributing a Machzis HaShekel. That every Yid had to give a half shekel. What did this half shekel go for? This went into a fund, to a public fund which wasn't the Beis HaMikdash, that from this fund they purchased karbanos. So even though the karbanos were not used right away, this was a fund where they used the karbanos throughout the entire year. But it would take time. They had to buy the karbanos, they had to buy the animal, the behemoths, and then they had to check them and make sure these behemoths can be used for a karban. And when did all this begin? All this began from the first day in the month of Adar. So in the times when the calendar was set, with each time having witness coming to tell us that they saw the new moon, so then you had to wait until Rosh Chodesh to know when is the first day of Adar. Now that we have a fixed calendar, Memela, we know that this week we will have Rosh Chodesh Adar. So that's why the Shabbos before, which is today, we already read in the Torah about the Inyan of Machzis HaShekel. And what is Bechlal, the whole Inyan of Korbanos? So here the Rebbe referred to what Alter Rebbe explains in Likutei Torah. The whole Inyan of a Korban is Adam ki yakriv mikem korban l'Hashem. Famous question the Alter Rebbe asks. Pasuk says, Adam ki yakriv mikem korban l'Hashem. A person who will bring from amongst you a korban to the Rebishter, and so shall be the halach. So the Alter Rebbe asks that the proper way the pasuk should have expressed itself, that the pasuk should have said, Adam mikem, a person from amongst you that will decide to bring a korban, the halacha should be so and so. This would have been the proper grammar how the pasuk should have been set up. Adam mikem ki yakriv korban l'Hashem. And the Alter Rebbe goes on to explain that here lies the entire Hayroah in Ruchnius, spiritually, what a korban is all about. The whole idea of a korban is not just that we take a behemoth and we bring the behemoth into the Beis HaMikdash and that we go through the physical process and go through all the details as we are told in Halacha. There is a deeper meaning to it. And that is that the whole inyan of a korban is to create within the person who is bringing the korban, that he should give of himself as a korban. And this is what the pasuk says: Adam ki yakriv mikem korban. Bring a korban, and the korban has to be of you. In other words, the sacrifice is not only that he's making a physical contribution, but it has to affect the person himself. The person himself, the donor, the one who's bringing the korban, he has to realize that what is the whole inyan of korban. The Rebbe always brings from the Rabbeinu Bechaye, one of the commentaries on Chumash, that korban stems from the word kilov. The whole idea of the korban is that the one who is bringing the korban is becoming closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore he has to give of himself. And that's the taich, Adam ki yakriv mikem korban l'Hashem. There, besides the physical korban which he's bringing, he has to give of himself, and that is the ruchnis, the inyan of the korban. But continues, this also has a shayches to this week's Seder. What is this week's Seder? The Seder of the week is Vayakhel. Vayakhel Moshe es kol adas b'nei Yisrael. Moshe gathered, congregated all of Yidden. All of the Yidden he congregated and brought them all together. What does this mean? Moshe united all Yidden. As the Rebbe says, there's an inyan of Vayakhel. Vayakhel means to congregate all Yidden and bring all Yidden together. However, Moshe is able to accomplish something deeper than that, something stronger than that. The fact not only are all Yidden one congregation, but all Yidden are totally united. Ki ish echad belev echad. All Yidden are united to the extent of everyone being like one person with one heart. And who was able to accomplish this? Moshe was able to accomplish this. And whom did he bring together? He brought together every single Yid. In other words, this has a shaykhs to every single Yid. In other words, There's the Moshe within each and every one of us. So the Rebbe continues. What Alter Rebbe brings out in Tanya, that there's a spark of Moshe Rabbeinu, there's a nitzitz of Moshe Rabbeinu within each and every Yid. And what are we told? That every Yid has this power to bring together, to congregate, to accomplish the inyan of Vayakhel Moshe. And this goes to such an extent. What does Rashi tell us? When did this happen? That Moshe congregated all of the Yidden? This was Machas Yom Kippurim. This was the day after Yom Kippur. In other words, the highest level that a Yid could reach, that's the day after Yom Kippur. There's a Gemara, the Gemara tells us that there was one of the Tanoim, one of the sages, his name was Bava ben Buta. And Bava ben Buta would bring a korban in Asham Talui every day. What's an Asham Talui? An Asham Talui is a korban that one brings Talui, a chatos one gives when he knows definitely that he sinned. When one is in doubt if he sinned, that is when he brings an Asham Talui. So Bava ben Buta wanted to make sure that everything is perfect. Well, it says that every day he brought an Asham Talui. When did he not bring an Asham Talui? Machas Yom Kippur. The day after Yom Kippur, he didn't bring an Asham Talui. Why? Because on that day, everyone is perfect. It's the day after Yom Kippur. So in other words, what does this show us? This shows us the highest level a Yid could reach to. The Rebbe says there's a conversation between two of the Nesiim. I think it's the Rebbe Rashab and his father, the Rebbe Marash, or the Friedrich Rebbe and his father, the Rebbe Rashab. That it came after Yom Kippur. He asked his father, "Was jetzt? What do we have to do now?" In other words, when we're talking about a level of Machas Yom Kippurim, here we're talking about a certain shleimus, a certain ganzkeit, a certain whole and complete where one has reached to. And what do we say? That this inyan of Vayakhel Moshe, uniting all of Klal Yisrael, what does this accomplish? This accomplishes to bring Yidden up. When Yidden are united and when Yidden are together, this brings them to such a level, this brings them to the level of Machas Yom Kippur, the day of after Yom Kippur. This also relates to the inyan of Purim. What was Purim? Purim was also, what was Haman's intention? Haman's intention was to destroy Chas v'Shalom all of Klal Yisrael. Minar v'ad zaken, from young and old, taf and nashim, women and children, everyone on one day to destroy all of Klal Yisrael. What do we find here? The opposite. Vayakhel Moshe es kol hadas b'nei Yisrael. How all of Klal Yisrael are united and are successfully united to the extent that they are reaching a level of Machas Yom Kippur. This also has to do with the inyan of Machzis HaShekel, which we spoke about earlier. The power how a person can utilize his money. Money is something which is very precious, to such an extent that there's a Gemara, Adam bahul al mamoinai. A person is very nervous about his money. The Rebbe says this halacha is brought in the halachas of Shabbos. The halachas of Shabbos, this is brought regarding in case Chas v'Shalom a fire breaks out on Shabbos. In case a fire breaks out on Shabbos, to know what we are allowed to do, what we're not allowed to do. So there the Gemara uses the expression Adam bahul al mamoinai. A person is nervous about his money. He's a tumult about his money. The Rebbe is saying but there's the same concept in a positive way, of gute Sache. And we also know that the Gemara tells us that tzaddikim, mamoinam chaviv aleim, yoisa migufam. That's what the Gemara says. That tzaddikim, even regarding small amounts of money, it is more dear to them than their own body. We find it by Yaakov. Yaakov went back after he took his family across the river. So what do we find? He went back. What did he left over some, Gemara uses the expression, pachim ktanim, some small little jars. And he went back to pick him up. What do we derive from this? That tzaddikim, mamoinam chaviv aleim yoisa migufam. That the mamoin to a tzaddik is something which is very dear to him. It's explained at length what this means. Why? Because mammon means in yonim gashmim. There's always the tzutzis kedusha. There's always sparks of getlichkeit in all in yonim gashmim. So that's why a tzaddik is after it, because he wants to uplift these sparks of kedusha that are in these small pachim ktanim. But regardless, b'negeya arinyin, what we see from all this is what money means to a person. So at the same time we say, to such an extent, that the Gemara uses the expression, Mamoinai shel Adam, on a pasuk, Es kol hayekum asher baraglayim. whatever they possessed. What is in their feet? So the Gemara says, what shaykhs does it have to money? Because finances, this is what puts a person on his feet. Here we are bringing out what a person can accomplish with his money, can accomplish tremendous inyanim of tzedakah. Such inyanim of tzedakah, such outstanding inyanim is what we're talking about here, to such an extent that he can take a gashmiistic, a matbeya, a gashmiistic, a contribution, and turn it into a matbeya shalesh, which we discussed last week, the fiery coin, which the Rebbe showed Moshe Rabbeinu what is the machzis hashekel. Regarding the machzis hashekel, Moshe inquired, what is the machzis hashekel all about? And Chazal tell us, brought in Rashi, that the Rebbe showed him a fiery coin. We explained at length last week what's the meaning of a fiery coin. That's the meaning of the varmkeit, the warmth and the inspiration which one puts into tzedakah when he gives the tzedakah. And this is how money can be used in a positive way. Money can also be used chas v'shalom in a negative way, when a person is involved in earning a living, and then he will overlook halachas of Shulchan Aruch, he will overlook hasagas gvul, not being careful whether he's harming somebody else by himself standing in business. If he's hurting his neighbor, he's taking away from his neighbor. And at that time, money creates a pilud, money creates a separation from one yid to another. But when it's used in the proper way, on the contrary, then it creates a closeness, and it leads to the total inyan of achdus, ki ish echad, belev echad, when the funds are utilized in the right way. The Rebbe continues, this is also what we find right on the Sedra. Sedra continues with the pasuk lo sevaru eish b'chol mish v'seichem b'yem ha-Shabbos, that you're not allowed to light a fire on Shabbos. What is the Rebbe is teaching it in continuation, in conjunction to what we're talking about here? In other words, what's the pshat? Lo sevaru eish b'chol mish v'seichem, that these inyanim of gashmias, this inyan of being involved in earning a living, etake has to be done, but at the same time, how should it be done? Do not light a fire with it. In other words, do it, but you should know that this is not the main inyan that a person has to be involved in. Rebbe always brings a taich. There's a pasuk, Yigia kapecho ki soichal ashrecha v'toivloch. If you will eat the toil of your hands, praised is the person. Is praised and good is to the one who enjoys the toil of his hands. The Rebbe always mentions, why does the pasuk say Yigia kapecho? The pasuk does not say Yigia roishecha. In other words, the toil of one's head, person always has to know that all in Yanim Gashmim, that's secondary. There's roish and there's regel. And there's kapayim. There's hand, head, and feet. The person has to know that his roish has to be in Yanim of Torah mitzvahs and Yanim of Kedusha. There's something which is secondary, which is kapayim. That's his hands. And here the pasuk is saying, Yagia kapecha ki soichal ashrecha v'toivloch. Praised is the person who knows that his toil, his aravanya, as far as in Yonem Gashmim, is something which only relates to his hands. In other words, he knows that there's something above that which is more important. The Rebbe always says, could be that as far as time is concerned, a person may be putting in more time of his day in earning a living. And this is how it has to be, and it has to be so al pi Torah. But at the same time, a person has to know what is his main inyan in life. Where darf the Roish sein? Wo darf sein der Roish? Der Roish darf sein in Yonam of Torah mitzvahs. It's a famous episode repeated. I didn't mention it today, but it's worthwhile to mention. There was one of the main great chassidim by the Rebbe Rashab. He was a big Talmud Chacham. He was a great scholar, a very learned chassid. He knew a lot of chassidus. He knew a lot of nigla. And he was in business, and he was in the business of kalashas, of rubbers. And he once came to the Rebbe Rashab, and the Rebbe Rashab was kind of unhappy with the person. The Rebbe Rashab felt that he's really not involved in, not keeping up with his ruchnius as it would be fitting for this particular person. I mean, he was somebody he knew a tremendous amount in learning. It became Zerasach Lernen, and he was one of the selected people amongst Chassidim, and for earning a living, he was in business of kalashes. But the Rebbe Rashab felt that he's overdoing it a little bit. He should be involved more in Inyanim of learning Torah, saying Shiurim, and so forth. So Rebbe Rashab tells him, I've seen feet in kalashes and rubbers. However, I never saw a head in rubbers. Getting back to our Inyan, this is the whole Inyan, what Machzis HaShekel, the Inyan of Tzedakah. And this is what Machzis HaShekel is all about, that Inyanim of the funds, Inyanim of finances, of money should be utilized in the proper and in the right way. But we continue that from Pashas Vayakhel, we go into Pashas Pikudei. What is the Inyan of Pikudei? Pikudei is an Inyan of counting. B'chlal the Inyan, each time the Rebishter counts Yidden, it expresses an Inyan of love from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Yidden. And especially it's brought in Medrash that when Mashiach will come, then it will be a final count, then it will be a count, the 10th count. And this is the count which we are looking forward to, for the count that the Rebbe should take us out of Galus, and then he should count us when he will bring us into Eretz Yisrael. Here the Rebbe was talking about going back to the Inyan of Vayakhel, and how everybody can have an influence on others, and bringing out that at times there's a certain person whom we are trying to help. We're trying to help him in Gashmias as well as trying to help him in Ruchnias. And at times that person may even be at a very, very distant from us. And again, when we're talking about distant, it could be he's distant in Gashmias and he's distant in Ruchnias. And at the same time, when Yidden are together on Mispalel, Yidden daven together to help this individual, to help this person, then it definitely has an effect. Especially at Tefillah of a Tzibur, at Tefillah of a Rabbim. Because we find the entire text of Tefillah is arranged in such a way that all Tefillahs we say in a plural sense. Why? Because this is the whole meaning of Tefillah, that we are not davening individually. We're davening all together. Memela, when we are davening and we're asking the Rebishter, that they should help somebody else, somebody who in the meantime is very far, it will definitely have its effect, and that the tefillah will be fulfilled. Rabbi again spoke that all those who have submitted mashke should come up and they will announce whatever occasion it is for an occasion of Torah, Tefillah, Tzedakah, especially that it's taking place in a building, in a shul, which is a mokim shemagadlam by Torah, and a mokim shemagadlam by Tefillah, and a mokim where it's in a place where davening is done and Torah is done, a place where Tzedakah is done. Now, when we're talking about Tzedakah, there are all various levels of Tzedakah. There's Tzedakah in the Gashmistic sense of Tzedakah. There is, however, an Inyan of Tzedakah when we help somebody, when we give a friend a good advice, we give a friend the proper advice, it's also an Inyan of Tzedakah. The Rebbe urged very strongly that we arrange all Inyanim for Purim. First of all, to see to it that all Yidden have the means that they can be able to celebrate Purim properly. And then to see that the Inyan of Purim reaches to every Yid, Anoshim, Noshim, V'taf. And we also bring the message of Simcha to all Yidden, that this is the time of Mishenichnas Adam, Marbim B'Simcha, that we have to increase in Simcha. And increasing in Simcha means that every day is more Simcha than the previous day. That's the time we increase. We add on Simcha, more Simcha and yet more Simcha. There was an expression here in the Sikha that being dedicated for other people to such an extent that dedication could also be expressed that when one has a glazel of l'chaim in front of him and somebody else takes it away and somebody else uses the glazel of l'chaim, takes it away from you, that's also an Inyan of Mesiras Nefesh. You're giving up the l'chaim so that somebody else should be able to say l'chaim. The Rebbe brought out, we're talking about those that can be Yotzei Tzava b'Yisrael, those that can join in the army. So as far as joining the army, there were limitations of age. That's an Inyan. When was one able to become Yotzei Tzava b'Yisrael, he had to be at the age of 20. Prior to that, he wasn't able to join the army. However, when we're talking about the Ruchneistic army of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, here there are no limitations of age 20. This begins as soon as a child is born. As soon as a child is born, and the child is born, and in the room there is a mezuzah, and in the room where the newborn baby is, there's a shir hamalos hanging. So all these things bring a person from his birth, as soon as the child is being born, that he or she are becoming part of Tzivos Hashem, because the whole inyan of coming down into this world is to bring Dira Lo Yizbarach B'Tachtonim, to make this world, that this world should be worthy of being a residence for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So in this type of a war, in this battle, it does not just this does not begin at age 20. This, as soon as a child is born, he or she are taking part in this battle of making the world suitable, that the world should be worthy of being a Dira Lo Yizbarach, that the world should be able to absorb Gettlichkeit and accept HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world. The Rebbe concluded there are those that may say that to do this type of an avodah, it is hard. It's hard. Talking about all of these inyanim is the Zeh Shver. It says there's a pasuk, the koivei Hashem yachlifu koyach, which means that if one is weak, if one is tired, he exchanges with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What's the pshat you exchange? When you exchange, you could give the Rebishter something which is of no value, something which is worth tired and used out, and the Rebishter gives us in return an abundance of strength. Just like we find even in halacha, there's a concept of chalipin. Chalipin means exchange. An exchange could be even with something which does not even have the value of a pruta, does not even have the value of a cent. In halachic details, halachic ramifications, if there is a keli, as long as it is some sort of a vessel, even it does not have the value of a penny, of a pruta, if a penny means a pruta, but let's touch it that way, then it can also be exchange. It's considered an exchange, and the one who's giving this keli, which is practically worthless, will receive in return something which has much more value. And the same thing is between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We are tired and weak. However, we are giving our weak and used out soul to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is refueling us with a tremendous amount of koyach. The koivei Hashem, those that have, koivei is Meloshen tikva, hope. Those that have tikva and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, yachlifu koyach. The Rebishter exchanges our koyachas. In other words, the Rebishter takes away, HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes away our weakness and replaces it with strength and power, so that we should be able to fulfill the shlichus. And when we're talking about strength and power, it means pashut and gashmi, that there should be harchava, an abundance of all inyanim gashmim. And when there's an abundance of all inyanim gashmim, then we could definitely serve the Rebishter properly. The Rebbe mentioned it actually twice in today's Farbrengen. Mentioned earlier that those that have submitted mashke will come up and they will announce whatever project, whatever affair is taking place. He says they should come up, sollen sie oile sein. But many times, and today as well, he says they should come up and they should have an aliyah. In other words, by coming up, there is also a spiritual elevation in this. Everything in Gashmias is reflected in Ruchnias. But it says until we will have the announcement, there will be the announcement that Mashiach is coming. This announcement that Mashiach is coming, and this, towards the end of the Farbrengen, Rebbe also brought out this point. And the Rebbe says that, the Rebbe asked at the end of the Farbrengen to sing She'ibana Beis HaMikdash and to sing Niet Niet, which in Russian words, Niet Niet Niekava means Ein Oid Milvadoi, there's no one other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This song originated, for those that don't know, it's not interesting to mention. When the previous Rebbe was in prison, after being imprisoned for 10 or 12 days, then he was released on Gimel Tammuz, as we all know, and he was sent off to Kostroma. Kostroma is a far-away city deep into Russia, and that is where the Rebbe was sent off to. In fact, the Rebbe once mentioned that the Frierdiker Rebbe knew why he was arrested. He was well aware for what reason he was arrested, and he was well aware why they are sending him to Kostroma.
Why? For the fact that he was strengthening and demanding the upkeep of Yiddishkeit in that time Russia. The Rebbe mentioned that before the Rebbe left the Kostroma, he took a chassid, one of his chassidim, and sent him in a mission to Kostroma to make sure that there's a kosher mikveh in Kostroma. Imagine. So anyways, when the Frierdiker Rebbe was in Kostroma, and it was Yud Beis Tammuz, there was one chassid with him, this one chassid packet. If I remember correctly, his name was Rebbe L'chaim Altois. By the way, the Rebbetzin, the Rebbetzin Nishmas Eiden, also went along to Kostroma with the Frierdiker Rebbe. But this Rebbe L'chaim Altois, when the news came that the Frierdiker Rebbe is being released and he can return back home and reassociate with his family, at that time he was, to express his joy, he ran out into the street and ran around the house where the Frierdiker Rebbe was living, was arrested in Kostroma, ran around where he was living under arrest, ran around that house, dancing very strongly with this nigun yet kava. Very suitable to the time. He was bringing out Ein Oid Mulvadoi. He was thankful to the Rebishter, so he brought out Ein Oid Mulvadoi. There's no one other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's recently at Farbrengen that the Rebbe always asks to sing this nigun, as he mentioned, that this brings out even as Sfas HaMedina, not only in Lashon HaKodesh, even in other languages, also this concept of Ein Oid Mulvadoi. So the Rebbe asked for these two nigunim to be sung, and he said, let us hope that even before these nigunim we will finish with the singing of the nigunim, we will have the announcement that Mashiach is here, and Mashiach is taking us all. As the expression in the Zohar goes, Amanana Shamaya on the clouds, he's taking us all out of Golas and taking all of us straight into the Kodesh HaKadoshim.
I didn't hear everything you said.
Expression. The Rebbe says, those that have submitted mashke, sollen sie Oila sein. Oila means to go up, to be elevated. He says it also means not only in Gashmis, they should have a spiritual.
Okay, no, I thought you had said something about people in general that had any problems or wanted a bracha to come up and cast before the Rebbe.
No. Specifically regarding those that have submitted mashke.
Okay. What were examples of the weakness that you'd hand over to Hashem?
The very simple one is Maidani. The most very simple one is what we go to sleep at night and we wake up in the morning. But it means in general that our source of kayach is from the Rebishter. And mainly even at times we fall back, we come into a weak mood, so to speak. I mean, that's how it seems. So we should know that the Rebishter is always refueling us with kayachas.
Let's give it over.
Our source of strength is from Rebishter. Yes. Make an exchange. Make a chlipping with him. And he will fill us up with kayachas.